Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Classroom Matters with me, your host, Christy Houle. Today, super excited that I am sitting down with a very good friend of mine. We've worked together for about the last 10 years, wouldn't you say?
Probably,
Stephanie?
yes.
Yeah. So Stephanie has a really long title and sometimes a difficult last name, so I'm going to let her share all that with you. But I was thrilled to be able to have her on the show today. Like I said, she's a good friend, a mentor, and was a colleague for quite a while, coming from the University of Missouri, St. Louis. So Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Give us your last name first.
All right.
Because I butcher it every time, even though it's been 10 years.
That's okay. It's Koscielski.
Koscielski.
Yes, it is. So Stephanie Koscielski, and the long title is Senior Director of Clinical Experience and School Partnerships at the University of Missouri, St. Louis.
So in a nutshell.
What in a nutshell, that means that I am responsible for making sure that all of our teacher candidates have the quality experience out in clinical experience that they need to become excellent teachers for the state of Missouri. And I do a lot of work with the state of Missouri to make sure that we're in compliance, and as well as making our partnerships in our studio schools.
And we're going to talk about studio schools.
Yes,
I'm
we are.
excited to throw that out there
Yes.
because as we get talking about it, obviously I was involved with that, and we'll get to that. So I am super supportive. I think it's like one of the best things that's ever come out of a university as far as making teachers more prepared. But that's a heavy burden that you have with your position, I would think now, especially now. And, we talk a lot on this podcast about how prepared are teachers. And, we've talked to a lot of educators. We've talked about teacher stress. We've covered all these topics. And so you're kind of there at the beginning, getting them ready for what is to come in their career, and really probably making some heavy-duty decisions on if these folks are ready and who's going to be fit and who's not going to be fit, and what they need to do to be thrown into a classroom setting. So about how many teacher candidates would you say come through your program every year?
We're certifying about 240 candidates a year in all certification areas right now.
Okay. Is that grown, changed?
I would say it's stable, but it's definitely probably around half of what we saw around in 2008.
Why do you think that is?
I think that there is a national teacher shortage, and I think that all systems are not set up to support teachers and teacher candidates as they go through their program, and some of the challenges that we face. Well, there's a wide variety of challenges that we face. Some are around the DESE requirements that the state has imposed on our candidates. Some are around stress, the traumatic experiences that the students have in the schools, the traumatic experiences that the teachers have in the schools, learning to have self-care, learning to be everything to everybody is a very, very tall order and very difficult. And so I think that we don't have a good retention rate in the career, and so we're not able to fill it as quickly as we need to.
Mm-hmm. So I want to dive into the studio schools model because I know that that's something vital to what you do in your program. And most of the people listening, they may know what that is, just being, maybe around that model if they're, from this area or local or have any, connection with your university. But most folks are more familiar with the traditional student teaching model, which is what I went through, obviously, as a teacher, and I was in one room with one teacher for this many weeks, and then I went to another room with another teacher for the rest of my weeks. And, it was a very sort of in a vacuum. I was in the room with the teacher, and part of my experience was great because I was with a really effective teacher. And then the other part of my experiences was really horrible, I'll be honest, because I was not with an effective teacher. And so, but I didn't really get an opportunity to be a part of the building and be a part of what was happening in all areas of the school. So tell us a little bit about what the Studio Schools model is exactly and sort of how that differs from traditional student teaching.
Yes, so I had a very similar experience as you when I was a student teacher as well, half good, half very, very lacking. So our model is designed to be a collaborative model with studio school partners. So we talk to a school, we engage them in being a partnership, and we put a cohort of candidates into the school at the beginning of their year-long practicum so that there is a real collaborative model happening. We have our teacher candidates scaffolding each other. So we have a group that are coming in new, we have a group that are getting ready to graduate. So they work together, they collaborate together. the main focus that they're working on in the schools is to actually improve student learning outcome of the students in the building. And the way that we do that is we have our teacher candidates work with a number of really highly effective teachers in the school. So they get a variety of experiences. We want them to see a 360-degree view of the school. What is everyone doing in the school? What are the teachers doing? What are the special ed teachers doing? What are the counselors and the psychologists doing? So when they come out, they know that they are a part of a team of educators, and they're not, as you say, just working in a vacuum. They're also highly supported by their clinical educator, who's on site with them 1 full day a week, mentoring them, observing them, giving them feedback, and developing those important relationships in the school. Our teacher candidates also do a lot of work around responsive design. So we ask them to think about what are they exploring, envisioning, and enacting in their work. So we have a thought process. It's called an IMP, Inquiry into My Practice. And we have our teacher candidates think very intentionally ahead of time. What are they going to explore in their content and in their pedagogy? How will their lesson be enacted? What will happen first, second, and third? And finally, when their lesson is fully enacted, what do they really want their students to know? So they're naming these things ahead of time so that they can be intentional when they teach.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like they're getting just a much more broad experience, and they're really being treated, and I can say this because I actually participated in this program when I was an administrator, and I thought it was wonderful, not only for the teacher candidates, because they really were a part of our staff when I was involved with it, and it was great for us too, right? So the school benefited from it because we had, at one point 7 and then 14.
Yes, you did.
We had a lot, and it was wonderful. That gave the school a benefit as well, because we had, at any given time, 7 to 14 teacher candidates that were there to help out, doing one-on-one instruction, working in small groups, helping out with, in the cafeteria,
Yes.
really seeing what it was like to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. Because when I started teaching, I was like, what? I didn't know this is what it looked like on this side of the building, or I didn't know this is what they did in 6th grade, or that I was teaching, based on what they had learned the year before and the year above, and all of these things. Because again, like you said, we had a very different type of experience. I learned one way in a 4th grade classroom, and then I learned another way in a 1st grade classroom. It's kind of all I knew. And so when I participated in the program, I just thought it was amazing how these teacher candidates they were just made a part of the staff. They were like teachers.
They were like teachers, and we appreciated that you included them in their professional development. One other key factor is that they start when teachers start. So when teachers come back in the beginning of August, our teacher candidates are right there, getting all the professional development, setting up the school, understanding the goals of the school for the year, really, as you say, being a part of the staff and having that opportunity to be viewed as a professional and to really look at how they're impacting student learning outcome from the beginning.
And so you must have to pick your partner schools and your partner districts very carefully.
Yes, we do. So we will talk to the principals and we'll see who's really interested in being a partner with us, who's going to support our teacher candidates, who's going to support our program and allow our candidates to have the flexibility in the building that they need to see a wide variety of experiences to, as you say, understand where learning comes from. What's happening in 5th grade is absolutely dependent on what happens in 1st grade. So how do schools spiral that learning? How does it impact what I do this year? What happened last year?
And I think the design too, to piggyback on that, is really helpful because everybody wants to sort of be part of the team, right? Everybody wants to be part of the group, and I think that your candidates in the schools that they're in are really truly a part of the team, and they're viewed as another teacher in the building. Parents recognize them, other teachers know them. Most of the candidates are invited and will come to extracurricular activities.
Absolutely.
They'll do bus duty, and all of these things that the traditional student teaching model doesn't really ask of them. They come in, they don't really know anybody. They will usually eat lunch on their own. And so it's really great, I think, for the teacher candidates to really feel to what it's like to be part of a team, and that that they have an effect on all the kids in the building and not just those 20 or 25 and that one teacher.
Absolutely. And the other great thing about our studio school model is that there isn't a scripted amount of time that a teacher candidate will teach. So we're not saying to sit around and observe. At any point in their practicum. We're saying we want you up and active and teaching, co-teaching, independently teaching, as you mentioned, leading small groups. So it's a very active model. All passivity has been taken away from it. So we want our teacher candidates contributing and teaching at all times, which is really key to their development.
Yeah, because I mean, really sitting in the back of the classroom is not doing them much good. I mean,
Absolutely
maybe for
not.
a while, but yeah, you're right. Like at any given moment, so I remember a couple times I'm like, "You're teaching today."
Yeah, exactly.
And they were like, "What?" And I'm like, "You're fine. You're going to be fine. We'll be there with you. You have to jump in there and start doing it because that's how they're going to learn, right? They're going to learn by doing."
And another value added that we have with our program is that our candidates can actually substitute in a situation of need. So if you came in this morning and you didn't have enough subs, you ask one of our teacher candidates to take over the classroom, and we say that is a compliment. They are showing that you can do it, you can succeed, and you're jumping in there and teaching. It's another value added that we think we give to the schools.
Not to mention that they now already have their foot in the door for a possible
Yes.
employment in that building.
And many of them are being hired,
Yeah.
and many of them are being hired now, I think, as a direct relation to the teacher shortage. They're being hired at the end of their practicum 1, and they're getting hired under provisional certificates during their practicum 2, and that is in all certification areas, including elementary, which is a definite shift
Yeah.
from even recent history.
Do they get to pick what grades they want? Or when they go to the building, are they just told what grades they're going to be in?
So there's a collaborative model with that too. So it's a combination of what they would desire in combination with their their clinical educator and the school principal, kind of figuring out where they are going to start. As you know, they have a variety of opportunities to work with different grades. So where will they start? Will they start in special ed? Will they start in gen ed? So it's just a discussion at each school.
And I think it's nice that they have the flexibility, that both the teacher candidates, the teachers in the building, the principals, because the way that education is now, I mean, you could your whole life, want to be a kindergarten teacher or a first grade teacher and think that this is what I'm going to teach. This is my dream. Listen, I don't know if all teachers did this, they probably did, but I played school in my grandma's basement.
Of course.
All the time. And trust me, I was always the teacher. Does that surprise you?
No.
I was never the student, always the teacher.
Of course, me too.
And if anybody came into my grandma's basement and wanted to be the teacher, they had to go. I was teaching. So we all did that, right? Like most educators, they want to be a teacher most of their lives. But you kind of sometimes pigeonhole yourself, I think, sometimes, where I only want to teach kindergarten or first grade. And so I think the ability to throw some of these teacher candidates into other grade levels is really important for them because that's realistic. You might go into a district that has, a K through 5 building and think, obviously certification will guide a lot of that, but you in your mind may think, I've always wanted to teach second grade, and they offer you a 5th grade position, you're teaching 5th grade, or move you in the middle of the year or at the end of the year. So I think having the flexibility that this program has is really important for how truly quickly it can change in the public education system.
You're right. You hit on a very key factor. And I do have this conversation with the teacher candidates when they say, oh, no, I only want to be in second. And their opportunity right now is in 5th. And then they come back and they say, wow, my eyes are really opened. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that happened in my building a few times where a couple of folks came in, they're like, I really want to do first. And I'm like, okay, you'll be in 6th grade this year.
Exactly.
And once the shock wears off and they do it, or vice versa, right? I had a couple of male teachers. And for whatever reason, they usually always have a tendency to go towards the older kids. And I remember, one gentleman specifically, he was like, 6th grade, and I put him in a 1st grade classroom.
I remember that. And he was like 6'4",
yes.
wasn't he? Yeah.
And at the end of his time with those kids, he had completely changed his mind. He was like, I want to teach 1st grade now. And
I recall that vividly.
Yeah,
yes.
It's just, you have to force these candidates into uncomfortable positions sometimes because then they're going to be ready for that, and it's not going to come as a shock when they get hired somewhere.
Exactly.
So I love it. I mean, do you offer traditional student teaching as well, or are all your teacher candidates only in this program?
All of our teacher candidates are in the program except for our art teacher candidates. They are still in more of a traditional one-on-one kind of placement at a variety of schools. But everyone else is in the studio school model, and we're moving music in this year, and PE has been in for a couple of years, so it's very integrated. And all of the teacher candidates get together once a week, and they have a collaborative exchange with the clinical educator. So they're thinking as professionals. I'm not just a PE teacher. I'm not just a second grade teacher, but I'm a professional, and here are the challenges that I have, and here are the things I need to know about. And so that they work together, and we're really working on the out of the isolation and into collaboration with this model.
Mm-hmm. So you said you have about 240 candidates come in through the program each year. Obviously, not all 240 candidates that get up in front of a classroom to teach are really meant to be in front of a classroom teaching. And those are things that I'm sure that between yourself and the liaisons, the clinical educators that work in between the district and the university see that. The teachers probably recognize that. The administrator probably recognizes that. So though that probably lends for some uncomfortable, difficult conversations. What do you guys do in that event? Because we don't want to just push people through just because they want to be a teacher. If they're not really ready or prepared or good at it, what direction do you send those people?
Yeah, we absolutely don't push anyone through who's not prepared dispositionally or professionally or even content-wise to go through. So UMSL has what we call a care and concern team, and it is made up by 4 or 5 people in the university, including me, in the College of Education, and we'll meet with the candidate, and we'll try to see what is the underlying cause of what's causing you not to succeed in the classroom. So sometimes the teacher candidate just needs another semester. So we'll put together a professional development plan for them, and we'll let them start over, a fresh start in a new school and a new semester. And most every single time, just that time and that extra support will allow the candidate to succeed. However, if the candidate does not succeed, we have an informal route that a candidate might switch into, a Bachelor of Educational Studies. They can't just move straight into it. There'll be additional coursework, but they can work in informal educational settings. We also have an opportunity to move them into an arts and science degree called a Bachelor of Liberal Studies. So all of their work is not for naught. They can still get a degree, but they can't be certified to work with children in the state of Missouri if they just are not successful, if they're not dispositionally suited, or they're not professional in their work.
And I certainly applaud you for doing that in your organization because, let's face it, not everybody should be in front, and it's okay, but the fact that you recognize that and that we're not just pushing teachers through, because it hasn't always been that way. Obviously you went through public school, I went through public school, and there were a lot of teachers that I had that had no business being in front of a classroom full of kids, and so I think that your effort in that is admirable, although sometimes it puts you in a difficult position, but you're having the conversations that need to be had.
Oh, definitely. And we have a real good team in place, and then we also have a campus care and concern team. So if the candidate is having issues that are even beyond us, they are supported at the campus level too. So we're coaching them up, we're supporting them, and we are really trying to make sure that everyone at least earns their degree. If we do have to separate them from certification, then we always feel that that's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. So the ones that you do push through, the ones that are successful, the ones that represent themselves well and graduate, do you feel that we really are truly, and it's not just the University of Missouri St. Louis, but all universities, and that there's been such a huge shift and change in the dynamic of the family unit, in technology, in social media, in the whole child is how they come to us at school. Mm-hmm. We see it on the news all the time, how kids are changing and school districts are changing and all these things. Do you think that the teacher candidates are really truly prepared for some of those obstacles and challenges that are going to hit them when they walk into a real classroom setting on the first day of school?
So we are trying our best to prepare them. What we do with our teacher candidates is we have what we call grand seminars, and this is a way to offer professional development and a way to support them that they might not get in just their traditional classes. So, for example, we talk to them about trauma-informed education. We talk to them about why students come with the toxic stress that they come with, and what are some ways that they can handle that toxic stress. Some of our school partners are working with restorative practices now. I've seen it done well, and I've seen it pushed through too fast to where it's had sort of a backlash where there's a perception that the students are not being held responsible for their behavior. So there's there's a process to developing the restorative practices in the school, and so I see some baby steps with that, and I see some missteps with that. So we're trying to at least inform our teacher candidates. These are the things that are happening in schools. Be a part of it, learn, and we're trying to provide them the support with guest speakers on, especially on the trauma, the self-care. We're also working with different agencies to come in. So one day we did an all special ed day. We're going to do a global literacy day to help to think about, what are students' cultures? What is the literacy from their own culture that you can bring in and support them? So we're trying a number of wraparound processes to try to help them. The social media piece, we really work with them as educators around what does social media mean for you and you're as a professional, and where can your missteps be? Where can your own personal missteps be with social media? And what are your responsibilities as a citizen, as a teacher, to have a respectful and respectable social media presence?
Yeah, I didn't even think about that one. Actually, when I was asking you about that, I was thinking more about how, the social media is what rampant with kids and causing all kinds of issues in the school. But, I mean, the social media as a teacher.
Mm-hmm. Well,
you see stories on the news where this such and such person had put this on their Facebook page or on their personal profile, and it's sort of coming back to haunt them. So talk about that a little bit. Is that something that you're seeing happen quite a bit?
I can tell you that a few of our teacher candidates had immediate exit slips for things that they put on their social media account.
And it's such a different world, because when I was going to school to be teacher, we didn't have any of this stuff. So,
I know.
we lived our personal
Yeah.
life. And now
We
it's
had
kind
party
of like
pics.
we even what?
We had party pics.
We did.
Yeah.
That was about it.
Yep.
But we kept our personal life personal. And now nobody has a private, depending on how much you put out there. I mean,
Right.
you could know everything about everybody just by scrolling through their Instagram, their Facebook. And as an administrator, that was something good that I would look at and say, I don't know if this is the kind of person that I necessarily want teaching. Or a teacher had called in sick, and I see them at the baseball game. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's happened.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think because some of these candidates are probably pretty young, coming in their early 20s, they are growing up, and they've grown up in this age of social media, and it's just second nature
Their
to them.
filter is gone. Their filter is gone. They think that if they went to the party or they did the whatever they did, that's okay. But, we try to explain to them, teaching is a really, really different profession. You are held to a different level. You are in charge of children's learning and safety, and you have to be a very, very upstanding member of the community. And you may not view this particular post as meaning anything, but a family does. And so your lens has to change. So we spend a lot of time talking about that. I in fact encourage them to go back and scrub everything as much as they can, even shut things down. And certainly we talk about never friending or following or doing any of those things with their students, to really try to maintain that boundary, to make everything private, and not to communicate with students in any way except for the way the school would want you to communicate with the student.
Yeah. So for all of you young teachers that are listening, that are new to this and have all of those social media accounts, clean it up.
Yep, for sure.
Be very careful what you're putting out there, because somebody's going to see it.
Yeah, if you don't want to
Somebody
talk
will see
about
it.
it in an interview,
Yeah.
delete it.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, if you wouldn't bring it up in an interview or put it on your resume, just
Yeah.
don't even put it out there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you have certain requirements to the state. And I know that those requirements are getting a little bit hairy lately. I mean, there's a lot, and they're changing. How in the world do you guys keep up with all of that and then everything else you have on top of you to get these folks ready to be in a classroom?
That is a great question. So one of the ways that we're keeping up with it is that I am on the board of MACD, which is Missouri Association of College of Teacher Educators. And MACD used to be sort of in a parallel universe with DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And DESE had a way of telling us and telling the state, here's what's happening, here are the changes, here are the new requirements. However, I would say in the last 2 years, our relationship has become collaborative. So we intentionally sought to have DESE view us more as a policy recommending entity, and then they would take our recommendations and rule on it. So in essence, they're kind of leaning on us a little bit more to decide what makes sense for the teacher candidates in the state. And that has really, really helped. So we had the MOPTA for a few years, which was an exit, a very expensive exit exam, but it wasn't really a one-time exam. It was overtime. It wasn't efficient. It was kind of poorly written, and as I mentioned, expensive. So the MACD board, not the MACD board, but the MACD entity developed a MEAS evaluation, Missouri Educator Evaluation System, which is based on the 9 standards that any teacher would be expected to master and be efficient at. So we've been developing this form. It's taken the place of the MOPTA. It's free. It makes sense. And the big shift, the big change, which we're still waiting to see how this how this part will go because it's going into its first official year, is that half of the points that go with the MEAS come from the clinical educator and half come from the clinical teacher. So for the first time ever, K-12 teachers have a direct influence on whether a teacher candidate can be recommended for certification or not. So this is a huge shift. It's in the right direction. We want to know what the K-12 teachers think about our candidates. Do they think they're ready? But it has its challenges. It has its challenges in essence, making sure that those forms are completed. Because if a clinical teacher were to not complete the form, that could directly jeopardize if a teacher could be recommended for certification. So that's huge. So last year we had our trial year with a very low cut score. Now we're going into a much higher cut score this fall. So the collaboration is good. The collaboration is there. One of the things that we're trying to change now is the content GPA requirement with the state is a 3.0. And if you have some of the harder contents like physics, chemistry, biology, you might have a lower content GPA, and that could literally prevent you from being certified, even though you have the state GPA of a 2.75.
Mm-hmm. Do you think some of this, I mean, it sounds like a lot.
It is a lot.
And, I'm sitting here as I'm listening to all these requirements and expectations, like, I don't know if this would keep me possibly from wanting to go into the profession again because, we didn't have any of this when I went into it. And maybe these are things that are all being put into place for good reason. But do you think, or are you seeing that it seems kind of stressful to some teacher candidates that are coming into the program that they're being expected to adhere to all of these requirements and policies and take the exams and get certified? I mean, it just seems like sort of an overwhelming amount of stuff that they're having to do to get into the profession.
It is an overwhelming amount of stuff.
Do you think it's turning people away?
I think it's catching people at a point where they can't maybe succeed on one of the tests, and then we lose them. So we have the MOCA, it's the content exam, and if people maybe aren't successful on it 1 or 2 times, maybe then they'll leave instead of maybe taking another course or trying to get tutoring, or if they're running up against those roadblocks. At UMSL, we try to take it in steps for them, logical steps. Do this now, do this then. We try to make it a more fluid, easy process for them, even though it's all there. But we try to break it down and support them as much as we can.
So it's not just being all thrown on them like at one time.
No, stair steps.
Building, yeah,
stair steps.
Baby steps.
Yes, baby steps.
Baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
Because I agree with you. I would hate to think that, especially depending on what you're teaching, right? If I'm an elementary school teacher and I'm teaching first grade, I might not need to have an in-depth knowledge of physics. I think that a good teacher, in totality is someone who can learn and work with others and have good relationships with children and see children as the whole, not necessarily that, we're the best in the room at physics or math. I mean, all of that needs to be there at a certain depth, I think, right? But putting so much focus on some things that might not be really what makes a great teacher, and we're all trying to figure it out. I mean, I know, the state's making changes, federal's making changes, everything's kind of changing, but it does seem like a lot. And it seems like, we might be losing some good folks because of what you're saying. But maybe it's necessary. You look at it from the other side. Maybe we need all these things in place because we really need to get the highest quality, best people in front of our kids.
One thing that some people in the state are looking at is, are there correlations? Is there a correlation between a certain GPA and a certain teacher who will be retained for a long time, or a teacher will have positive student learning outcomes? We can't really find those correlations yet. So a lot of it is what you say. It's the stick to it. Are you going to stick to it? Are you going to learn? Are you going to collaborate? It's those skills that we think are going to keep our teachers in the profession. So we've talked to Desi a lot about that. Like, where is the correlation? How can you prove it to us? How can you prove to us that someone with a content GPA of 3.0 is going to be more successful than the person with the content GPA of a 2.9? The 2.9 person cannot be certified. And the other thing we're working on with the state is related to GPA also, because this person may have gone to college a long time ago and not done well and have a low GPA. Now they need 100 credit hours to get up to the 2.75. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to work with them on some kind of forgiveness policy. If you've come back as an adult and you want to be a teacher and you're committed to the profession, but you have this old GPA just dragging you down, that automatically puts you out of the possibility of being a teacher. So that's another thing we're working with the state on now to see if there can be any kind of forgiveness policy. We're suggesting that anything that's non-teacher ed or not being used for the degree of certification not be added into the GPA. Mm-hmm. If it's just extra, why do we need it? Yeah. So that's really that is really keeping people out of our profession right now.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, I have two questions I want to ask you.
Okay.
And the first one, you've seen a lot of teachers come and go. You've been doing this a really long time, and you're very successful at what you do. The first one is, what would you say for all of our teachers that are listening, or our newer teachers, what are the 3 top characteristics that you feel a highly effective teacher should have?
Well, I think a highly effective teacher needs to be really, really committed to kids, and that means all about kids, supporting them, understanding the trauma that they come with, understanding that every kid needs them, not just a certain amount of kids, that they have to love every kid in their classroom is number 1. I would say the ability to keep learning all the time is number 2. What do you want to learn about your content? What do you want to learn about teaching? What do you want to learn about where your kids are going in the future? As an aside to that piece, I recently spoke to somebody who said that there are 6,000 empty coding jobs in the United States right now. And so coding is one of those things where people are kind of afraid, or they don't know, but if a teacher is willing to learn about coding and incorporate that in that classroom, there's no telling what kind of seed that could develop. And I think passion is probably the last one, a passion for what you're doing, getting up every day and being as enthusiastic and as engaging as you can. Of course, you didn't ask me for 4, but somebody who plans, you do have to have a plan for what you're going to do and be intentional about what you're teaching during the day.
And be ready to change it at the blink of an eye.
That's
if it's
right.
not working.
Flexibility is key.
Be like, okay,
flexibility
kids,
is key. I usually say that
change in
first.
direction.
Right.
This obviously isn't working for you.
Yes.
And then my last question is, if you were sitting here talking with a teacher who was either in my first year of teaching or getting ready to go into the teaching field, what piece of advice would you give me?
I would tell you that the first year is going to be full of unknowns. Just be flexible, be easy on yourself, and get up every day and take it as a new day. Sometimes you just have to tell yourself this too shall pass, and remind yourself why you're in the classroom. You're in the classroom for those kids. Get up every day with a smile on your face, start again, try again, and build on what worked.
Well, we're going to end with that wonderful piece of advice. Stephanie, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It's always such a pleasure just to see you.
Thank you.
And
you
to
too.
be with you. And I so applaud everything that you're doing. And hopefully we can have you back on the show.
That'd be wonderful.
Later in the year, and we can see how your new batch of teacher candidates are doing. That would be amazing.
Thank you.
And so any certain places we can find you, if someone wants to get in contact or just look up your program, where should they go?
University of Missouri St. Louis, clinical education.
Okay.
So, yep.
All righty. And that wraps it up for this episode of Classroom Matters. Don't forget to check us out on the educate.today website.